I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're delving into the apocalyptic world of Thomas Starbuck's amazing book. It is called Deadly Ground. In this gripping tale, humanity grapples with a relentless virus with no rules, where survival is uncertain minute to minute. The author's protagonist believes he's chosen to be the second Adam, tasked with the monumental responsibility of restarting the human race. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Studio of Books for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Tom, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Well, it's just an honor to be here with you, Logan. As I say, I'm a huge Blacklist fan.
Okay.
I've seen some of your work there, so I'm a little familiar with you, and I feel real welcome to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. James Spader is an amazing actor, so you've got great taste in choosing the Blacklist, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
And I see a lot of that great imagination in your book as well. Let's start out by giving the folks at home an overview of what Deadly Ground is about.
All right. Yeah, maybe it's the easy thing to just start at the very beginning, huh?
Oh, yeah.
This actually has been part of my life for right now 24 years. The original thought came to me as I was returning from a silent retreat right after my mother's passing. And it was the turn of the millennium. So it was in May of 2000. Driving home, I was kind of hearing stuff about bird flu and SARS, different things like that. And it just kind of sparked my thought process, what if? And from there, now that was in 2000. And so for probably the next 5 years, it was just kind of one of those things that melts in your mind and kind of goes along. And I had a friend who produced motivational videos here in Des Moines. And so I told him, I said, hey, Art, I've got an idea that I think would make a great movie. And he said, well, let's have a cup of coffee and talk. Well, I kind of gave him an outline, and the original vision for this thing was to be a pilot and then morph it into a series. And that's kind of the way I started working with him. And he said, well, first things first, we need a script. And I said, well, this is an idea and I've never done this before, help me. And he said, well, I've got a woman that I've worked with on some of my videos, and I'll put you in touch with her, and you guys kind of go back and forth, see what you might want to do. Well, it was at that time when Art that introduced me to Judy Belch-Hornbook. And back in 2006, we began writing a script. And the original script we titled Last Man Alive, which is the essence of the storyline that we have today. But with Judy, what a blessing she has been, because not only is she an accomplished writer, I always refer to her as my 125 word a minute word processor. She's just brilliant and very creative. And so she and I worked up a script, and we found it was just very difficult to try to get independent financing. So over the time frame, right up until about 2016, she said, hey, you know, we might want to back into this. Let's maybe convert the screenplay to a novel, and we'll try to maybe publish the novel, and then at some point maybe attract a movie producing company or a talent, what have you. Well, so we did in 16, we converted the Last Man Alive into Deadly Ground. And Judy, not only an accomplished writer and just a terrific woman, was an artist, and she's done all the artwork for our cover and stuff. So Judy's been invaluable in bringing this product where we are today. So with that, now I was leaving Las Vegas on a road trip up to Yellowstone with my wife, and that's when Judy and I started working back and forth on this conversion process. And one night after 2 or 3 days in Yellowstone, we were heading out back home to Des Moines, and we stopped in Billings, and I was watching, I think it was a Tom Cruise Reacher movie. And on a commercial came on, and it was about, if you have an idea, a manuscript, whatever, give us a call. Well, with that being said, I thought, wow, that's kind of convenient. We just started completing this conversion. And so when I got back, I took our manuscript, submitted it, and that was with Christian Faith Publishing originally. And they liked it. We published it. And then it gets into the marketing side. And, again, just taking an idea and moving it to the publishing process, was quite an effort. And then, again, running into some difficulty just trying to find a market for that. I was contacted by Source of Books, and they seemed so interested in the story. And I thought, with the advent of now we've had COVID, a lot of the virus, kind of has been part of our culture now. They were really enthusiastic. And after that, here we are with you, Logan,
Amazing.
talking about the book. Yeah.
Well, it's a great journey over 20 years. And I think that the year 2000 felt apocalyptic in a way because of the whole doomsday clock thing that was going to happen and all the computers were going to fail. So I think that was probably getting your juices flowing a little bit creatively as well. And certainly 2020 has been a game changer when it comes to viruses. Let's give the folks at home a little bit of the story. What's the story of Deadly Ground about?
Well, it's a story of survival and redemption. My main character, AB, he's Adam Bradley is his name, but we go by AB. He was discovered that he was a chimera, and this was in his youth growing up. And a chimera is an actual medical condition where twins are conceived, but only one actually matures but maintains both sets of unique DNA. And so typically chimeras are very savant in many, many different areas. And that's where AB found himself as he was growing up. He was, extremely talented with many, many different talents and gifts, and got into medicine and wanted to know more about his condition. So he began studying genetics. And eventually, he now gets into the CDC and is united with his lifelong friend, Clayton, who was also a geneticist. And then what happens is they discover that there's a virus now that they've detected over in Africa. And what was so stunning about this virus was that they would show satellite imaging of towns that were populated, and then within days were just swirls of dust. And what they determined was that this virus was attacking all the primates that were on the planet, and it was airborne. And so what happens now is that it starts moving through time and space in the air, and AB finds out that he is not affected, but everybody around him. So he realizes that being a chimera is what's given him the license to go on. And so he collects all of his data from the CDC on his genetics on chimera, and realizes that he's going to try to find some additional survivors and kind of go from there. And from that standpoint, he takes off across the country searching for survivors. Eventually gets back to California after quite a bit of excitement on travel. And what happens then, his depression starts setting in because of loneliness. He realizes that he is alone, notwithstanding all the infrastructure, everything is in fabulous condition, and yet here he is alone, and everything's free, but he can't enjoy it because he needs that relational part of his life. And so he gets heavily into drinking and approaches the point of suicide, gets up on the roof of his house, and this incredible thunder lightning storm is struck. and drops off the house onto bricks, and he's beat up. And just then he looks up into the sky and he sees a light crossing his property, and kind of catches him by surprise. And he crawls into his vehicle, ends up following that light out into the desert area, and turns out to be an extraterrestrial that's landed. And at that point, he was exhausted, beat up. He passes out, and the next thing is he is awoken by this woman who turns out to be Venestra, is the extraterrestrial who is the commander of this alien fleet. And she then proceeds not only to take care of him, but she heals him and gets him, these miraculous kind of gets him back to a very normal state. They develop a relationship, and from that standpoint, it just kind of goes in where they finally find their compatible DNA. They end up producing a pregnancy with her, and everything is going great. He now has a purpose to live, and the next thing is that she's about to give birth and says she needs to go back to her craft where she can get proper medical attention. She goes back. He goes out the next day, and she's gone. At that point, it is totally devastating. And yet at the same time, he realizes that, there is more to this world than just loneliness. And he decides he's going to give the world a funeral. And of course, he's an accomplished pilot and everything. And he gets in his plane and his DC-3, loads it with flowers, and he flies into the interior of the country, gets out and pushing flowers out, kind of that funeral type feeling. And he gets around Colorado, and he sees a dust, and he comes in closer and realizes is someone riding a horse. And so he comes down and realizes that there's a woman riding a horse. He lands the plane, finds out she's a doctor that worked at the CDC, is a chimera, and that she had to leave because of the devastation to join her aunt out in Colorado. And that's where they then find a relationship. And so Audrey and AB, they produce a son. This is over 5 years. They produce a son, Clay, and she's pregnant with her second child. And then he's very peaceful with everything. And the next thing you know, the light comes back across his property. Venestra is returning. Huh. And at that point, he realizes things are going to be different. And that's kind of the cliffhanger at the end that we hope to morph into a series of picking up on the gene pool that's created there with two chimera, their offspring, Venestra, and her to be what we think to be a son. So it kind of gives you that sense of how do we repopulate the earth. Wonderful. And that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
I love it. I mean, it's very much like the science fiction that you and I think grew up with, of like Omega Man and Soylent Green and Planet of the Apes, and name anything that Chuck Heston was in, Charlton Heston was in that era, and it kind of fits into that genre, right?
Oh, it does. All of that. And then again, kind of the thought I had is kind of a mix of them bringing that Star Trek kind of sense of unlimited creativity that, could then be exploited with repopulating the earth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I'm with you on that sci-fi.
We need to get a young Charlton Heston. I don't know where we're going to find him. I think the closest thing we have to Charlton Heston is Chris Pine, who does the new Star Wars movies. Star Trek movies,
Star Trek, yeah.
So
well, it was interesting. Along the way, I had an opportunity to sit down with Billy Bob Thornton. A friend of mine was good friends with him, and he was doing a concert. He's actually more of a musician than he is an actor, but he was doing a upfront with Willie Nelson down in Tulsa, and my friend invited me down to an after concert party. And so I had a chance to sit down with Billy Bob, and we talked about the storyline and everything. He really liked it, put me in touch with his publicist. And then as I was kind of following up on that, he decided he was going to do Fargo instead. So, but anyway, that he really liked it. But that was the kind of guy that I thought would make a good AV, kind of off the wall, creative. That, yeah, but I hear what you're saying is very solid as well.
Well, if Billy Bob Thornton was available, I would definitely go with him because he brings such a dimension to the role. He has
Yeah,
such a great subtext there. You never know what he's thinking, just the way he delivers a line. I mean, he's got all of the charisma and all of the personality of one of the greats, whether it's Jack Nicholson or Christopher Walken. I really view Billy Bob Thornton in that same light. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And
yeah, it was
he
a
was in your
delight.
position. What's that?
I was going to say it was a delight sitting there with him for probably 45 minutes to an hour,
Yeah.
just chit chatting about everything from Bad Santa on down. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's a real genuine, interesting guy, and I really appreciated being with him. But yeah, we're on the same wavelength as far as kind of an A/B type.
Yeah.
Very creative, unpredictable. Yes, indeed.
And he's a self-made star. I mean, he wrote, directed, and starred in Sling Blade, which of
Uh-huh.
course is what jump-started his career.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one a little footnote there. When I was first talking to him, he asked where I was from, and I said Waterloo, Iowa. That's where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
He said Waterloo, Iowa. My first girlfriend was from Waterloo, Iowa, and her name is Lisa Cohn. And I says, yeah, she lived 2 blocks from me. I knew her growing up. So small world, huh?
That is a small world. That's an only in Iowa story, right?
Only in Iowa.
That's awesome. That's great. I'm glad you connected like that. And I'm glad you got that encouragement from somebody at his level,
Uh-huh.
because that's how the arts work. I mean, that you can have a masterpiece in your hands, but it doesn't mean it's going to get recognized. You got to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing to say, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. And now, like, part of your strategy was to, okay, scrap the screenplay and do a novel because the novel would be cheaper to produce and it could wind up in the right person's hands. And I think that's a smart move for sure, because there's so many great themes in this, including the virus. Talk to me a little bit about the concept of a virus without rules that you wrote about in your book.
Well, the whole thought of that was that this virus, once it attaches or you contract it, it usually shows up as a red blotch in your facial area.
Mhm.
And within 20 minutes, it degrades you to dust.
Hmm.
It's just an incredibly devouring, active virus. And there are scenes that we portray where, people, you see them clothing with dust, and coming out the sleeves, and in religious, type communities where you see people in a synagogue with $10,000 checks, and laying in dust, that type of a thing. So it does give you that sense of um, when I was experiencing COVID, I was really kind of thinking in terms of, COVID is a pandemic that's touching the world. And I kept thinking mine is still more devastating when you consider the effects that it has. And I think that's part of the horror. And as you read the novel, you just feel like you're trapped and there's nowhere to go, and you're inevitably going to perish in this virus once it attacks you.
Exactly. I don't think people realize it, but we really were lucky with COVID. When it comes to a pandemic, it killed a lot of vulnerable people, but fortunately, amongst the masses, it wasn't that deadly, not like your
Right,
virus.
right. Yeah, well, and we're all lucky to be around, and I think everybody did what they had to do to get through this. And I'm hoping now that we've learned lessons, and maybe take precautions as we go forward so that we don't have a major disruption such as we had in the lockdowns and everything else.
Absolutely. Hopefully we learned our lesson. The aspect of a chimera is very, very intriguing. How did you come up with that?
Well, I was watching a television, and I saw a documentary on actual chimera, people that had that condition. And they usually, and that's what intrigued me, was these individuals that had sculpting abilities that were just Michelangelo type
Mm.
painting. They also had technical skills, plumbing and engineering, so those, I thought, that condition lends itself, it's a real medical condition,
Mm.
lends itself to creating a very, very dynamic um, person to produce additional offspring. And
Mm.
that's where I was thinking, with Audrey and AB both being chimera, that there would be probably some pretty high powered offspring, as they would produce. So,
Yeah. Is there a section of the book or a scene in the book that when you created it, you're like, wow, I love this? Any want to share one of those with us?
well, I think when he gets to Denver, there's a real good scene there. He's with his Clayton's dog Winnie, who rescues back in Atlanta as he's taken off. And when he's in the truck, he leaves it running and goes in because he wants to get a Frederick Remington bronze. He loves art, and he has collected just incredible amounts of art over time. And so he knows that there's a catcher in the rye in the Denver Museum. So he goes in and he lifts the catcher into the rye, and all of the security systems running on emergency generation lock him in. And so there he is, completely locked in. He's got the thing. When he's in the truck, it's running. And just as he's giving up in desperation, he leans against an emergency bar on an exit door, and it opens up. And that's one of those scenes where you kind of, he made it, so then gets back to the truck, and then the scene is he's driving away, and there's Catcher in the Rye in the back window of the truck.
That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. Why did you choose Catcher in the Rye?
just because that was in an ad that he happened to see, and that was one of the bronzes of Frederick Remington that he did not own, that he wanted just in his own private collection.
Mm.
And the other thing was, a scene that we took out was him taking pallets of gold out of the Denver Mint and rolling those up onto the back of his truck. That another thing, that was his concept. Everything is free, and yet I'm so lonely,
Yeah.
and that was kind of what we tried to do with several of the different scenes.
Yeah, that isolation that you feel in those post-apocalyptic movies, I think, are what is kind of what's haunting about them and what's appealing to the audience, don't you think?
Oh, I do. There's just something that has reinforced within me that we are communal animals. I mean, we need relational relationships, however they may be formed. Um, just living alone, I mean, that's one of the things that would be so torturous, is to be alone, day in, day out. And I'm sure there are people on the planet right now that live in that kind of an existence, and how desperate that must be.
Yeah.
So that's where my empathy really goes to AB and the loneliness that he felt, and surviving and realizing that he's called to a higher position in his life,
Yeah,
and the redemption that he feels at the end, I think, is really well earned on his part.
absolutely. Have you started working on a sequel yet?
I do. I have several ideas, but as I say, right now I'm at the point where I just want to see how Deadly Ground is received in the marketplace,
Hmm.
and see if there are people that would have some interest. And if we find interest, I've got several storylines that I would love to share to get the juices flowing on a sequel, or as I say, my hope would be doing the pilot and then morphing it into a series. So, yeah, that's what I look forward to. I hope that happens.
I hope so too. Like I said, once it works out there, you never know whose hands it's going to wind up in. It'd be nice to get a phone call one day from Christopher Nolan or something, which would
Wouldn't
be,
that be something?
that'd be
Wow,
something, right? Yeah,
it would be.
exactly.
Indeed, would be.
And it happens, it's like a message. Somebody likened show business to me at one point to a message in the bottle. You put your work out there, whether it's a headshot, a resume, a query letter, whatever it is, and you just never know at what point you're going to get a response. And sometimes years later you do, like it comes across somebody's desk. Hey, I saw this. But like, what screenplay? Oh, that,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that'd
and
be
I'm
great.
still trying to acclimate to the that sense of having that idea 24 years ago and sitting here this evening in an interview with you. I
Yeah,
mean, that in itself has just got me spellbound as to the providential nature of this going forward. That's what gives me a lot of hope and encouragement. Is that not only you but others have seen this as something that's worthy of public consumption. And I hope I can support that all the way to getting it into the public. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes.
absolutely. Absolutely. And your screenplay is ready to go, right? You've written it already?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
got the screenplay in my hip pocket.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And during COVID, did you write much then?
Not really. You know, one, once the we had the book, the manuscript done, my focus was on getting it published. So over
Yeah.
that 2 year period of time and then promoting it, I didn't really spend much time in addition time with Judy writing anything additional.
Yeah. Why did you call it Deadly Ground, by the way?
Well, and I thought that was an appropriate title. Judy and I talked about that. And the sense being, you're walking on ground and everything about it, every footprint, every step you take, you don't know what the next step is going to bring. And
Mm.
so it's just kind of that deadly ground sense. And I thought that was a very appropriate title.
Yep, I think it is a very effective title. It captures your imagination, and it has that feeling of a sci-fi classic, Deadly Ground, too, which is what I like. Thomas
Oh, good.
Starbuck has written an amazing novel. It is called Deadly Ground. It is a gripping tale where humanity grapples with a relentless virus with no rules, where survival is uncertain minute to minute. The hero of the story, a gentleman who is a chimera, who is named AB, believes he's chosen to be the second Adam, tasked with the responsibility of restarting the human race. This is a terrific novel. There's a screenplay that's already been written. And to the folks at home, the links are below this interview, so you can order the book, check it out. You will love it. It is a real page turner, and you'll be glad you read it before it becomes a movie. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Logan.
Thanks, Tom. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.